Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are joining me for the first time today. My name is Lucy, and normally I'd be doing some sort of makeup tutorial or testing video, but today I'm coming at you with a little bit of a different video, and I'm going to be talking you through some of my favourite must-have makeup brushes. I'm getting a little bit of nostalgia sitting here because this is the background that I used to film with when I started my channel a few years ago now, but I just thought today we've got a bit more of a chilled out, chatty video vibe, so I've gone for a more chilled out background, not quite the harsh white wall that I normally have, and I've also just got some chilled out makeup on. Everything's just a little bit more relaxed today. So a question that I am asked literally, I feel like 100 times a day, I know that's an exaggeration, but I do get asked this all the time, is the brushes that I use for my makeup looks, more specifically for my eyeshadow looks and my intricate eyeshadow looks. I have covered this a few times before on my Instagram stories. I do also have a little highlight on my Instagram page covering some of my favorite eyeshadow and face brushes, but I thought, do you know what, I've put it off for long enough, and I think it's probably time I actually filmed a bit more of an in-depth video talking about the brushes and which ones I use the most often and why I like them. Without rambling too much, I'm going to jump straight into the video. There is quite a lot of brushes to get through. I think the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to talk through them in order of how I would use them, as in terms of steps in my makeup routine. But anyways, in with the video, I'm going to start by showing you brow brushes. So if you have watched a few of my more recent videos, you would know that I don't really fill in my eyebrows at all anymore. As you can see, they have got a little bit darker naturally, so it means I especially don't need to fill them in anymore because I don't want them looking any darker than they already are. All I do with my brows recently is just soap brows or use my Pink Honey brow glue, which keeps my brows up and in place all day. I do have a tutorial showing you how to achieve my soap brow look in my previous video, so if you're not so sure what I'm talking about, then please go and watch that first. Meaning the only brush that I really use for my eyebrows is a spoolie brush. Now this one is one by Molly O'Brien. It's the Kelv MO22 brush, and as you can see, it's literally just a spoolie on the end of a brush. I really like this spoolie because it's quite a large shape and it really brushes through each individual hair when I'm using it. Now I don't believe you need a specific brush to do your eyebrows because you can buy disposable spoolies on eBay and Amazon, which are a lot cheaper, and you get a lot of different ones in a pack. However, this one is obviously one that I reuse every time I do my makeup, and it's really easy to wash off. Because I only really use soap, it means I can literally rinse it under the tap and just brush through it with my fingers, and it gets rid of all of the old excess soap and product, and then I can go back to using it as normal the next time. And that's pretty much it for what I do for my brows recently. However, before I got into the soap brow trend, I was a lover of a pomade or a brow powder, and although I don't really do that anymore, I'm still going to show you the brush that I used to use all the time when I was using those products, because this is a great brush. So this one is the Anastasia Beverly Hills 7B brush. Now I'm sure you have definitely heard of this brush before. Almost every influencer who does their brows has probably shown you or used this brush before. It's a super precise tip. It's an angled brow slash liner brush, and I don't know if you can really see there, but it's super thin, and these are the best ones for brows because they can really create the lifelike hair strokes that you want. It's also got a spoolie on the other end, so you can brush through your brows and then fill them in with the actual brush. Moving on to carving out my brows. So there's a few brushes that I go between when I'm doing this step, but these are the main two that I reach for most of the time. So the first one is another Molly O'Brien brush. This is the Jim Bob MO11 brush, and as you can see, it's just a really thick sort of paddle concealer brush. If you have been on my channel for quite a few years, you would know that I used to absolutely be obsessed with the Zoeva concealer brush. I think that's what it was anyway. I think it was Zoeva. I've actually not used that brush in quite a long time, and I don't actually know where it is. Maybe I should try and find that again. Anyways, this is another version basically of that Zoeva brush that I used to love. It's just a really nice large rounded shape, and it means that I can get underneath my brows without being too precise, because I find that with smaller brushes there's more room for mistakes, whereas if I'm using a bigger brush I can sort of do it in one swoop and it makes life a bit easier for me. The other brush that I often find myself reaching for is the Plouise 7072. What a treat my base brush is. I have genuinely probably about 6, 7 or 8 of these brushes in my collection right now. These are an absolute staple brush for cut creases and carving underneath my brows. As you can see, the difference in these two brushes is that the Plouise one has a slightly smaller head than the Molly O'Brien one. It's also a little bit more rounded on top, whereas the Molly O'Brien one has a little bit of a spike up at the tip. I just really like using this one again because I can sort of glide it underneath my brow and it gives me no problems carving underneath there. Moving on to eyeshadow base. So patting in my eyeshadow base is something that sort of changes between every makeup look depending on how lazy I'm feeling. Sometimes I'll use my finger, sometimes I'll use a beauty blender, but most of the time I like to use this brush, and it is again another brush by Molly O'Brien. This is the Tari M02 brush, and it is a nice thick eyeshadow crease brush. I obviously don't use this as a crease brush. I like to use this as a patting in my eyeshadow base because it is nice and dense, but it's got a big surface area, which means that I can just pat in my eyeshadow base really nice and quickly, and it blends out like a dream with this brush. The reason that you're better off patting it than swiping it is because it means you can keep the full opacity of the eyeshadow base and also not smudge it around too much, meaning that when you come in with your shadows, you will be able to blend them and pack them on more opaque than you would if you were sort of swiping it into your eye. So just nice little pitter patters, and the eyeshadow base blends out like a dream with this brush. Okay, so moving on to the main event now, and that is my eyeshadow brushes. So first of all, I'm going to talk you through a set of brushes which I rave about all the time on my channel, on my Instagram, and this is the Class of 86 brush set by Unicorn Cosmetics. Now, I think I'm missing a few brushes here. I couldn't find the rest of them, but the set comes with a few different eyeshadow brushes and also a couple of more intricate eyeliner and concealer brushes too. The blending brushes that come in this set are some of my most used blending brushes, specifically this tiny little one here. It's one of the brushes that comes in the set, and it is the cutest little tiny blending brush. The other two blending brushes that come in the set, I think there is one more, maybe. So these are the other two brushes that I could find anyway that come in this set. For me personally, I'm more drawn to the tiny one because these are the sort of brushes I use the most in my makeup looks. It's a really great set, and I do recommend this set to a lot of people if you're looking for eye brushes. Moving on with some other blending eyeshadow brushes, I'm going to start with the smaller ones and work my way up towards the bigger and sort of more everyday makeup blending brushes. So the first two I'm going to talk about are actually by Plouise. So these are two of the brushes I've been using a lot recently. The one on the right is the Plouise number 124 brush. This is again just a really cute little tiny blending brush. As you can see, it's perfect for what I like it for, which is just sort of blending out the colors really seamlessly and not merging them together. The other one is this one by Plouise, which was part of the Worldy collection, and this is the 143 brush. Again, very similar size to this one right here. They're just tiny little blending brushes, and they are just perfect for what I like to use them for. Moving on to a different brand, these ones are some of my favorite brushes from Sigma. So up first, we've got the Detailed Diffused Crease E33 brush, which looks like this. It's super fluffy. Like, you can't even explain the quality of these brushes. I have tried so many different brush brands over the years, and I must say that Sigma is one of my favorite ones in terms of quality. Their prices are a little bit higher than the likes of Morphe, but I will say I think that with Sigma brushes, you are paying for quality. I have never had a problem with shedding from their brushes, nor have I had a problem with misshaping them after washing them, etc. They are just a really nice brush quality, and they are so soft as well. Up next is the E36 blending brush. This is a staple for me. I have, I think, 3 of these brushes, and it is one of my favorite brushes. So next to the E33 brush, you can see that the E36, you can see it there, it is a lot smaller and it's a lot more precise. I also like, again, that it is super fluffy, which means that it disperses the color really nicely when I'm using it to blend. Next up, we have the Precision Firm Blender, which is the E42 brush, again by Sigma. It's actually quite a similar sort of shape to the E36, but it is a little bit more, I'm gonna say, dense. It's obviously not dense of a brush because it is a blending brush, but it's definitely a little bit more dense than the E36. So as you can see there, it's just a really cute little shape. It's more or less the perfect sized eyeshadow brush. It's not too small small and precise, but it's not too big. That means that your colors are going to just merge into one. Not much more I can say about it. Then we have got the Shader Crease E47 brush, again by Sigma. Now this one is quite a unique shaped brush. It's almost a little bit flat, but because the bristles are long, by the end of the brush they are nice and bushy. I don't really know how to explain the shape of it, but this is another really tiny little brush. I use this in every single look. I absolutely love this brush, especially for blending out the top color right at the outer edge of my blend. I've just found another one of those unicorn brushes that comes out of that set. For some reason I didn't have it tied up with the rest of them, but this is another one. Again, I use this in almost every single look. This is a slightly smaller and definitely more dense brush. The way I like to use this brush is to pack on the color before I start to blending. So when I go in with the first color, I need it to be really nice and opaque. So I pick it up with this brush and I pack it on into my crease, and it's a really, really nice brush for that. And just a reminder, that's part of the unicorn set that I showed you earlier. Moving in with some of my Morphe brushes now. So I have literally, I'd say over 100 Morphe brushes, specifically eye brushes. Most of my eye brushes are Morphe, but these are the ones that I reach for the absolute most. So I'm going to start off by showing you 3 brushes which are very, very similar from Morphe, but they are different brushes. So this one is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill JH39 brush. This is a really, really cute little tiny blending brush. Again, I use this all the time. It's a super, super cute little brush, and it's also nice and dense, which means that you can blend out the colors really easily. Again, with dense brushes, I do often use them more for packing the color on than blending, but with this one in particular, I do also like to use this one with minimal pressure to actually blend out the colors as well. So this one could be used for both packing and blending. Another one from Jaclyn Hill's range is the JH38. So this is the next one along from the 39, which I just showed you. And as you can see, they are slightly different in shape, but they are very, very similar in size. I'd say this one is also a little bit fluffier than the previous one, which means this works better as a blending brush and not so much a packing one, but again, could use it for both. And then another one which is almost identical actually to the JH39 is the Morphe and Jeffree Star JS13 brush. When you put them side by side, you can see how similar they actually are in size, in length, in bristles. They are just very, very similar brushes. But again, I really like to use this one specifically for controlled blending. So when I'm going in with color on top of color on top of color, these ones are really, really good because it means you can control the blend without making sure your colors aren't going to merge into one another. Another similar size one from Morphe is the E36 brush, which is actually really coincidental because I've just realized Sigma is E36 as well. But this is the E36 by Morphe. I love this brush, especially for yellow. Now I know that sounds really, really weird, and if you've been watching my channel for a couple of years, you probably would have heard me say this before, but whenever I do a sunset blend, so I'm using like orange, yellow, pink, purple, whatever, I always like to use this one for yellow. Not sure why. I feel like with yellow, this one just packs on and blends out really nice and opaque. I feel like I get a good payoff with this brush. Don't know if there's much logic behind that, but to me it works. This is again nicely dense but also very fluffy, so I like to use it to really make sure I'm getting the most pigment out of my colors as possible. I would definitely say this is a staple brush, and you should definitely get at least 2 of them if you can. Another brush from Morphe which I use in almost every look is the Morphe M508 brush, which looks like so. It's a little smudging brush, and the reason I love this brush is for under eye shadow. So when I'm going in right underneath my lower lash line with a dark color, maybe like a dark navy or a black or whatever, it's a really good little one to smudge right in down at your lash line. Alternatively, I really like this one for things like a smoky liner. So if I'm going in for a brown or a black along my top lash line as well, it's a really great little smudger brush. I'd say this is definitely a staple, specifically for the under eye shadow. Now, if I'm going to tell you to get any brush throughout this video, it is this brush. So this is the Morphe M506 brush. I can't tell you how much I love this brush. I've got about 5 of this brush, and I literally can't explain how much this is necessary in your makeup collection. If you don't have one of these brushes, you need to get one all for. Like, it's literally such a good little brush. It's the perfect size blender brush. It's not too big, not too small, but it's nice and fluffy, but also quite dense at the same time, which means it gets a really good payoff from your shadows. I love this brush so much. I've been using it for years and I will continue to use it for years in the future. They also have a sister brush for this one, which is the M507, which is incredibly similar in shape and size, although the M507 has a little bit more of a pointed tip, whereas the 06 is a rounded tip, as you can kind of see there. So yeah, I definitely recommend the M506 or M507 from Morphe. Another one which I would say is a pretty staple brush for anyone's collection is the Morphe M456 brush. Now that's a really easy one to remember. It looks like so. It's just a really nice classic sort of blending eyeshadow brush. It's quite a little bit bigger than the ones I normally use for my colourful looks, but this is definitely one I reach for when I'm doing like more of a neutral coloured look, like browns, or if I'm doing something super natural. It's just a really great crease brush. It goes through your crease perfectly. It's not too big, not too small, but it's super fluffy and it blends out your shadows incredibly. And then we have the slightly bigger version of the M456, which is the M433. So when I put them next to each other, you can kind of see how similar in brush they are, although this one is a little bit bigger in size. Again, I will say this one is a staple for someone who doesn't really do controlled blend looks and does something more a little bit messy over the lid. Okay, the next two brushes I'm going to show you are both from Colourpop. I believe these both came from the Stone Cold brush collection set, so I'm not sure if you can buy them singularly, but these did come in a set with other brushes, eye brushes and face brushes too. This is the E23 brush. Again, a very tiny little blending brush, very similar actually to the E36 from Morphe. I just really like how small and dense it is, and you can get a really nice precise blend with this brush. It's also very soft. And the other Colourpop brush is the E27 brush, so you can see when I put it next to the other one, it is a lot bigger in size. It's basically the same shape, but definitely just a bit bigger. This is a really nice brush, especially for just a generic sort of blend. Doesn't matter what colors, what style you're doing, it's just a really good blending brush. And as you can see, it's like the perfect crease brush as well. So those are two of the Colourpop brushes I have been loving. Moving back into Molly O'Brien. So I'm going to start by showing you this one, which is the Molly O'Brien Jade M014 brush, which looks like this. It's really hard to show you when the white brush head is going up against my really pale white hand. This is a nice and flat brush, but it is also a fluffy brush at the same time, which makes this a really good brush for packing on the color before you start to blend. I like to use this to pack it into my inner corners, and then also with the same brush you can start to sort of blend out the edges because it is nice and fluffy too. So I really like using that brush. Next up is the Molly O'Brien Gracie M03 brush, which looks like so. It's actually kind of a similar shape to the Colourpop one I just showed you, but it's just your average sort of pencil blending brush. This one is quite long in the bristles and it does sort of spike up towards the top, which means that you're getting a really nice blend without having to worry about the shadows merging together. Now this one is the Molly O'Brien Cha Cha M08 brush. Now this is another really fluffy, very soft and not dense at all blending brush. This is the perfect blending brush for blending out the edges of your shadows to make sure everything looks nice and seamless. It's also actually very similar to the Sigma one I showed you earlier, which was the E33. They are very similar in shape and size and also density too. I will probably say this one is another one of my staple brushes. I think that everyone deserves to have a really good blending brush. This is the Jessie M027 brush. Again, it's a really nice dense sort of flat brush, which makes this a really good one for packing down your shadows before you come to blend them. Just packing your colors onto the outer corner and then starting to blend them out before going in with the actual blending brushes. This is just a really nice sort of dense eyeshadow brush, great for most aspects of your makeup. Then we have the Ravina M021 brush. Now this is your average sort of classic pencil blending blending brush. I really love this brush because it is so petite and tiny, but also it's very soft and really good for blending too. I like the fact that the top of the brush is sort of almost a little bit spiked up. And then the last Molly O'Brien blending brush I'm going to show you is the Kyra M020 brush. Now this is again just a nice little pencil brush. It's a little bit smaller than the last one. I absolutely love this brush for inner corner highlight. It's a really nice little dense pencil brush. It doesn't go overboard. It's the nicest little size to get right up in your tear duct there and pack on the nice shimmer shadow. It's also really good for going down the bridge of your nose with your highlight and also the tip of your nose too. I don't necessarily use this one for eyeshadow. Actually, I do sometimes use this when it comes to my tie-dye looks, but most of the time this is the one that I use for my inner corner highlight and my nose highlight as well. Just to quickly touch on the brush that I like to use for my cut creases, I have been loving the Plouise 7072 brush. I did talk about this at the beginning of the video about my eyebrows. I just wanted to reiterate that this is such a good cut crease brush. I use this alongside the blank canvas eye paint from Plouise as well. Just a reminder, you can use my discount code LSGmakeup10. But here you can see it's just the most amazing flat eyeshadow concealer brush. This is the perfect brush for my cut creases because it's got a really nice rounded tip, which means that I can get a really nice rounded shape on my eye as well. The way I like to use this brush is I like to really load it up with the product on the back of my hand, and then what I'll do is I'll pinch the very top of the brush so it goes really nice and thin. At the minute this has just been freshly washed, so it's not at its thinnest, but when it's loaded up with product it can be really thin and precise, which is exactly what I need for doing a cut crease, because the thinner the brush, the thinner the lines you will get. And of course we all like to have a really nice sharp cut crease moment. Okay, that is the blending brushes all done, so I'm now going to move on to some of my detail brushes. Now, as you guys probably know from watching my channel, or if you follow me on Instagram, I do a lot of very detailed eyeshadow looks. Some of them I will pop on screen here, which means that I need very detailed brushes. I get asked this more than I get asked for my blending brushes. That's how often this is. So I'm going to talk you now through some of my favorite sort of detail brushes for my more intricate eyeshadow looks. So starting off nice and simple, this is the Morphe M410 brush. This is just basically your flat concealer brush. I don't actually know what an average person would use this for in their makeup routine. Maybe for carving under the brows or something like that. I'm not too sure. But for me personally, I love using this brush for my split looks. When I've taken the tape off of the middle, I always go in with this one because it's got a really super straight edge, and I'll go in with my concealer to then go down the line and just clean up that edge. But yeah, this is definitely one that I use for my more intricate split looks especially. Similarly to that brush, I also do like to use the Molly O'Brien Millie M04 brush. Now, not always specifically this brush, but most brushes which are of a similar shape. I do have quite a few of this sort of brush in other different brands as well. This is a nice large in size angled liner / brow brush. I also like to use this for my split looks. The nice sharp edge means it makes it really easy to go down the edge of my split and just clean it up with some concealer before moving on to the next half, if that makes sense. I do also really like to use this brush for eyeliner as well because it is a nice big size, which means that I can stamp it onto my lid into shape rather than having to drag it across my lid. Next up, we've got the smaller version of that one I just showed you, which is the Molly M01 brush, and this is just your average size small angled liner brush. Again, could use this for brows, you could use this for your liner, but the reason that I like to use these brushes is for, again, my split looks. This is going to be really hard to explain for anyone who hasn't seen my split look, so I will pop one on the screen so you can kind of talk it through with me. The reason I love these brushes for my split looks is when I've done sort of a half split down the middle, I then need to follow on my cut crease onto the other half of my eye, which is really difficult to do with a seamless sort of looking cut crease. The reason I like to use these is because I can use the very pointed edge of the angled line, and I can go in with my makeup remover and I can continue from the cut crease line really seamlessly. Basically, I like to use these with makeup remover, either micellar water or like a cleansing balm, and I like to go in and just remove the product for the cut crease before I go in with the actual cut crease product, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Okay, so next up I'm going to go in with a couple of brushes which are all very, very similar, which come from different brands. So these are the brushes which I will use for my most detailed looks, things like if I'm drawing something on my eye or on my face, or if I'm doing a really, really thin sort of coloured line or something like that. These are the brushes I will run to first. So these are both by Shein Cosmetics. We have the 0 and the 00 brushes, and they look like so. They are so super fine, super tiny. I think that they are potentially nail art brushes. I mean, they came with an eyeliner set, so they are, in this instance, they're used as eyeliner brushes. But if you can't get hold of these, definitely just look for nail art brushes online, because most of them look like this anyway. But yeah, these are the 0 and 00 brushes. These are the two that I will use first, especially for very, very thin details. One that's also very similar is the Plouise cancelled brush in 123, which is easier to remember. And again, it's very, very similar. It's just a tiny little pencil sort of detail brush. Again, perfect for things like eyeliner, or if I was doing like a squiggly line. Brushes like these would also be really good for little fake freckles. If you had like a little pomade product, or if you were using a brow powder or something, you could use little fake freckles, and this would be the perfect size brush to create those. Another very similar brush is the eyeliner E11 brush by Sigma. This one is not as thin. It's obviously still very, very thin and tiny, but I personally use this one for actual eyeliner across my lid. So I would use this to get a nice sharp line across my eyelid. Could definitely still be used for both purposes, of course, but I personally like to use this one for eyeliner, but I know that a lot of you will benefit from knowing that this brush exists. And then another very similar one is the Morphe M250-1 brush. I don't know if that really makes sense, but I'll show you if I can. That's what it says. It's M250-1, and it looks like this. So it's again another really small little detailed brush. Again, probably wouldn't use this one for actual details because it is a little bit thicker. Saying that, I did actually use this brush quite a lot in my Among Us look, because when I was filling in the characters with colour, I did use this to paint them on. But other than that, it's quite a thin brush, but it is a little bit more on the thicker side compared to the ones by Shein Cosmetics. Could definitely use this for eyeliner, graphic liner, squiggly lines, whatever you want to use it for. Then we have got the M250-0 brush. So I think this is the little sibling of that one I just showed you. It's basically the same brush, but just shorter, and it's definitely a lot stubbier than the one before. I hope you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The tip of the brush looks like it's been sort of sliced off. It's a very, very blunt brush, but it's really small and cute in size. So again, another nice little detail brush to note. We have then got the E21 smudge brush, which is actually very, very similar to the smudge one that I showed you from Morphe earlier. It's just a little bit smaller in size. Again, perfect for going underneath your lower lash line or even along your top lash line. Then we have got the Sigma Waterline Liner E17 brush. Now, I like to use this one personally, specifically for when I do my lower lash line and I bring it out to the side of my eye in a sharp line. I don't think that makes sense when I say it, but I'm going to pop a picture on screen of the sort of thing I mean so you can understand. But when I do my bottom lash line and I bring it out to the corner of my eye in a nice sharp line, this is the brush I will use for that, because it is a very, very flat along the top. It's also like a little rectangular shape, so it's really easy to get a nice sharp line below there. Okay, now this brush is a very, very important brush in my life. I have tried finding a dupe for this brush. I promise you, I have looked everywhere for something that might be a bit cheaper than this brush, and I can't find anything. So this is the Anastasia Beverly Hills number 3 brush. This brush is a super, super unique shape. I personally have never come across a brush that's like it, and I absolutely use this brush in so many of my looks. Specifically, I use this in my double cut crease look. So when I do one cut crease along the top and then I do a second one underneath it, I absolutely love using it for this, because as you can see with the shape of the brush, it's got a really nice pointed tip, and then it goes down into 2 edges which are nice and flat. I like to use the pointed tip on this brush to really just do small little movements and get my second cut crease line. I also use this brush for my graphic liner, so when I do those looks with the rounded eyeliner, I always use this brush to get that nice thick rounded shape next to my eye. I also use this when I'm doing just normal graphic eyeliner, so if I'm doing one that comes across near my brow bone, then I use this brush 9 times out of 10 to do that. I absolutely love this brush. Okay, and the final 3 brushes I'm going to show you for today are 3 of the main brushes which I use in my tie-dye eyeshadow looks. Again, every single time I post one of the tie-dye looks, I get so many messages and comments asking me the brushes that I use for them. So I'm going to show you 3 of the main ones that I do. The first one is the Pinpoint Concealer F68 brush by Sigma. As you can see, it is a tiny little pencil brush with a nice little sharp tip. The reason I like to use this one for my tie-dye looks is because it is so tiny and precise, and it's also a little bit on the dense side, which means that when I'm coming to do the little circles of my tie-dye, I can just pat it on, and I can also get around the edges of the circles really easily. The next one is the Morphe M443 brush. Again, it's a really nice little sort of pencil shaped brush, and it's got a really nice sharp tip as well. Very similar to the one before, but this one is longer in the bristles, and again, that nice point on the edge makes it really easy to get a really nice sharp sort of circular line around the outside of the tie-dye. And last but not least, this is the brush that I would recommend to everyone if you are looking to do the tie-dye looks. This one is the Morphe M515 brush, and this is the love of my life, this brush. It's so stinking cute. It's the tiniest blending brush you will ever see in your life. It's so small and so cute, and it is the perfect brush for the tie-dye looks. Again, I need something that's so small but also will blend out the colors so that they don't look too sort of harsh against each other. So this is the perfect brush to use for that. If you've seen any of my tie-dye TikToks or my Instagram videos, you will see me using this brush so often. And that is it with my eyeshadow brushes. So if you were here just for the eyeshadow brushes, thank you for watching. You can click out now. I am also going to just talk you through a couple of my favorite face brushes because people have asked for them before in the past. To be completely honest with you, when it comes to face brushes, I often will just pick up the brush which is clean. A lot of them get dirty at the same time, and then I'll just be scavenging for one that's clean. But these ones, if they were clean, are the ones that I would always pick first. And I'm going to just go through the routine of how I would use them, the same as I did with my eyes. So starting off with my base routine, I would always go in first with primer, but I don't actually use a brush to apply my primer. I'm just lazy and I like to use my fingers. So for that reason, I'm not going to give you a brush that I would specifically use for primer. However, moving on to foundation, my favorite brushes for foundation are the Nanshy brushes. This one that I'm going to show you is the Buffed Base R01 brush. I do also absolutely love the F01 brush as well, which I will pop on screen if I can. Now this is what the foundation brush looks like. It's a really nice size. It's also got quite a rounded head, but it's also quite flat at the same time. It's nice and dense, but not too dense that you're leaving little stamp marks all over your face. It's super fluffy, it's super soft, and I really love this brush for foundation. So much so that I actually have it personalized, which again, I think is a really cute touch that you could get someone's name personalized on this as a gift. I would say that Nanshy is up there with one of my favorite brush brands, purely based on the quality of the brushes. They feel expensive and they feel like they're not going to break anytime soon. So I would definitely recommend to look for Nanshy brushes if you're looking for face brushes. The brush I've been loving the absolute most for my foundation recently, which I find gives me a really flawless full coverage look, is the Molly O'Brien PM015 brush, which is not the normal shape foundation brush which I would use. Usually I like to use the ones like my Nanshy one, which look like this, but I have been loving the Molly O'Brien one, and it's just the perfect shape and size to just pat in my foundation. It leaves no streaky stamp marks or anything like that. I love that it's got the nice flat edge, but it's also angled, which means that you can just buff it in really nicely around your face. Next up, we have got concealer. Now, I never really do concealer with a brush. To be honest with you, I'm normally quite lazy and I just use either my finger or a beauty blender, but if on the rare occasion I do use a brush, then this is the one I use. This is the Sigma Bake Precision P89 brush, and it looks like this. It's got a slanted edge, but it's also very flat and dense, which means it's a really good shape for getting under your under eye and also patting in the concealer there. Even if you didn't use a brush like this to blend out your concealer, it's also a good shape just to apply it. So you could apply it to the back of your hand first and then use this brush to pack it on underneath your under eyes. And and I really like this brush for my concealer. After foundation and concealer would come cream contouring. Now, as much as I don't really use a brush to apply my cream contour, or if I am doing so, then I'll just use either my finger or like a normal concealer brush. The brush that I love to use to buff it out is actually going back to the old days with the Real Techniques brush. Now, I don't really use Real Techniques brushes anymore. I feel like there's so many better brands out there for brushes which are much more affordable. However, I must say I absolutely love using the Real Techniques contour brush for blending out my cream contour. It's just a really nice shape brush. It's also very fluffy and not too dense, which means that when I'm coming to doing my cream contour, I'm not having to apply much pressure at all. We all know that the key with cream contouring is not to apply too much pressure, because if you're going to go in really rough to blend it out, what it's going to do is just take the foundation off from underneath the cream contour. So you want something that's really nice and light and also just going to blend it out really seamlessly without really having to try much, and that's exactly what this brush does with me. Next up would be contouring slash bronzing my face. Now, for contouring and bronzing, I like to use the same sort of style brush. I have at least 9 of these sort of style brushes in my collection, but these are the 2 that I use the most. So this is the Morphe E4 brush. It's just your average contour brush. It's got a nice slanted edge, but it's also very fluffy and not dense at all. When it comes to bronzing and contouring, you really don't want something too dense. Again, if you're going too rough on the side of your face, it means it's just going to strip off all the foundation underneath it. So I really love this brush because it's super soft, and the angled edge means you can really get in with your cheekbones and really carve out your edges. In the same sort of shape and style, this is the Molly O'Brien Arabella M06 brush, and again, I have so many of these sort of brushes, but this one is one of the most softest ones that I have. I really love to use this one again just for the same purpose, for contouring my cheeks and bronzing around my forehead and the perimeters of my face. It's super soft, and these are just the staple bronzer brush in my collection. You can't really go wrong with an angled contour brush. Moving on to blusher. Now, I use multiple different brushes for my blusher. Again, it really depends on the color of the brush. If it's dirty and it's covered in pink, then I'll just use whichever one is available, but these are my favorite ones for blush. So starting out is the Morphe M509 brush, and this has been my ride or die blush brush for about a year now. I just really love how sort of fluffy it is. It's not dense at all. It's probably the least dense brush in my collection, and because of how soft it is, it means that when you're putting your blush on, you're not getting too much product coming off, which means that you can just build it up really nice and lightly, and it blends out really well. I also like to use the Sigma Spotlight Duster brush, which is the F37 brush, and it looks like this. It's obviously a little bit bigger than the previous one I showed you. You could also definitely use this brush for under eye baking or brushing away powder underneath there, but what I like to use it for is for my blusher, because it is very soft and again, not dense at all. More recently, I have been absolutely loving this particular blush brush, which is the Molly O'Brien Daz M016 brush, and it is the perfect size, the perfect shape blush brush for me. Again, super soft. Like, this one probably feels the softest out of all 3, and it's just a really nice blush brush. I mean, there's really not a lot I can say about it. And onto my final 3 brushes. So when it comes to powdering my under eyes, I'm not much of a baker. I really don't like the thick, cakey, powdered look under the eye. So what I like is just a really nice soft brush, and I like to just brush it underneath there. And this is the Sigma Tapered Highlighter F35 brush. I absolutely love this brush. I've got 2 of them, and I use it almost every time I do my makeup. I really just like this to just lightly dust the powder underneath my eye to set the concealer under there. As you can see by the shape, it's got a sort of pointed tip, which means you can get really nicely into the folds of the under eye, and it's just so soft. I could just sit here just doing this for hours. So moving on to highlighter. So I personally don't really like to use brushes which are specifically made for highlighter, such as fan brushes. I just don't really see the point of them. What I like to use instead is large eyeshadow brushes. So my favorite one is the Morphe M533 brush, and it looks like so. This could definitely be used for eyeshadow if you had larger eyelids, specifically for just applying one color all over your lid and buffing it out. But I like to use this for highlighter because it's the perfect size to get a nice gleaming result without looking too glowy, if that makes sense. I find that when you use bigger brushes for highlighter, the highlight ends up all over your cheeks, which we do not want. So with a brush like this, I find you can get more control over where you're placing the highlighter, and you can really focus it into that area of your cheek where you want it to pop the most. And the final brush that I'm going to show you for today is the Morphe E62 brush, which is a tiny little angled contour brush. This I love to use for my nose contour. Now, I'm not a massive nose contour queen. I just like to sort of snatch up the edges ever so slightly and add a little bit of shadow there. So I really like to use this brush for that. It's basically a mini version of the E4 brush which I showed you, which was the large contouring brush. It's just a really cute little size and it fits in the contours of my nose perfectly. Before I wrap up this video, because I have been filming for what feels like hours now, I'm going to show you my favorite sponge, because again, this is something people ask me for recommendations on all the time. Throw away those $20 beauty blenders. All you need is the Unicorn Cosmetics sponges. Now, I'm not even joking. I have tried so many brands of beauty blender, so many different sponges in my lifetime, and I always run back to this one. I absolutely love how soft this sponge is. It's dry at the minute, but especially when it is damp and it's wet, it is the softest, spongiest sponge you will ever feel in your life. When I'm blending out my concealer and my foundation with it, it's just so pleasant and easy to use. I do have the original beauty blender and it's way harder than this one is. This is much softer and kinder on my skin. I also like that this sponge has got the flat edge. I really like to use this for if I'm ever baking underneath my cheekbones or underneath my eyes. And then obviously it's got the rounded corner and it's also got a flat bottom as well. As you can see by the pink stains under here, I love to use the bottom of this sponge for cream and liquid blusher. That's my favorite part of using this sponge, especially when it's wet. It just applies my cream blush absolutely flawlessly. Hello everyone, it's me cutting in from the future. I'm just editing this video and I've realised I totally forgot to talk about something that I made sure I was meant to remember and obviously didn't. There is a brush set from Morphe which I have recommended to many people over the years. It's basically an eye brush set. It's called Fave's eye brush set from Morphe. It's normally sold out on the UK website, but I believe you can probably find it on the American version of the Morphe website and also maybe like Cult Beauty. If it's in stock, I will link it down below. It's a set of 14 or 15 brushes, and a lot of the ones that I covered in this video are in that brush set, and it's a really great brush set. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's looking for eye brushes. Also, yes, this piece of hair has been annoying me throughout the entire video, so if it's been annoying you too, I am really sorry about that. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, you guys, and I'm gonna call that a wrap on this video. I feel like I have been sat here for hours talking about brushes. I really hope you guys did enjoy watching this video. I know it has been a really highly requested one, so if you do purchase any of the brushes that I talked about in this video, please let me know down below and let me know which ones you get. I do also have a discount code for quite a few of the brands I talked about in this video, so please see the description below to see all of my discount codes and see which ones might apply to the brushes. You can also find me over on my Instagram and my TikTok, which are both Lsgmakeup, and my Twitter, which is Lsgmakeup_ if you want to come and talk to me on any of my other socials. But for now, I'm going to call this a day. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.